This is All of It on WNYC. I'm Allison Stewart. Today marks the first day of Pride Month, a time to celebrate LGBTQ plus communities, culture, and history. Books have long played a crucial role in passing down stories that were often left out of mainstream accounts, documenting movements for equality and helping new generations of readers excavate a legacy of resistance. And at a time when debates over LGBTQ rights and representation and access to books continues across this country, many readers are looking to history to better understand the present. To help us explore some essential reads for Pride Month, I'm joined by author and bookseller Jules Wernersbach. Jules is the co-founder and owner of Hive Mind Books in Bushwick and the new general manager of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division inside the LGBT Center on 13th Street. Jules also recently published their debut novel, Work to Do, which is set during a single week at a grocery co-op focusing on unionization efforts amidst a hurricane. Wow, that's a lot. Hey, Jules.
Hi, Allison. Thanks so much for having me.
Listeners, we want to hear from you, too. What books have shaped your understanding of LGBTQ plus history, rights, or culture? Is there a title that changed your perspective? 212-433-9692, 212-433-WNYC. Or do you have a favorite LGBTQ author whose work you think everybody should read? Give us a call at 212-433-9692, 212-433-WNYC. So I wrote you a note. I told you what we were going to do on all of it, and you wrote me right back. It was great. And you came up with this great list for us. What was your criteria? What did you use as guidance?
So I will say that when I first started to make this list, I just did a brain dump and it was 30 books long before I even started to dig a little deeper. And so I was like, okay, I was like, well, what are my constraints here? And so I looked for a good mix of books that, first of all, showcase all of queer and trans identity. Queer people are not a monolith. Mm-hmm. I wanted to make sure that we were representing as many colors of the rainbow as we possibly could in our queer world and our queer literature. And then I looked for a mix of books that I felt were really good, just sort of classic queer history books, and then some more contemporary things, some books that have come out recently. Mm-hmm. And then I really was looking at books. I'm a big nerd, shockingly, as a bookstore owner and worker and writer. And I love a lot of like really deep cut university press titles. But for this, I wanted to really find things that were maybe going to be easier to find in a bookstore. Mm-hmm. You could certainly find all of these at our bookstores. And things that would be just a little bit more accessible in that way, so that if you were maybe taking your first step into learning queer history or exploring queer history, you wouldn't be immediately put off by sort of deep, really deep stuff. Although these books are all very deep and good and interesting and well written.
Well, let's get into it. Yeah. On your book, Times Square Red, Times Square Blue by Samuel Delany. This originally came out in April of 1999. Why has this book remained relevant this long?
This book is one of my all-time favorites to hand sell at the bookstore. It is two separate essays. The first was written in 1996, and then the other in 1998. And it is timeless insofar as it is about cruising. It is about the Times Square theaters, so right at the turn of the millennium. So those were theaters that were showing, pornographic films and were sites for cruising and for gay cruising. And it is such an incredible snapshot into that period of time in New York City, right as Times Square was being sort of Disneyfied, as we'll say.
I remember.
Yeah, and quote unquote cleaned up. And Delany takes you right into those theaters. You really see what's going on there. And it's just an absolute classic. And I think is still very much speaking to the way that queer people are, and, cis gay queer people, and well, really all kinds of queer people are engaging with each other even today. And it is also a lesson in like, what was that like, and how does our queer behavior shift? Times Square has changed a lot, but it doesn't mean that people aren't still cruising in places, and you're not going to find that elsewhere. And it's just a really interesting look at how a city changes.
How does the book challenge the conventional ideas about public space and who belongs in the city?
Well, that's something he's looking at in this book, certainly. It's, there is this attempt, he's looking at it as, here was an attempt to clean up Times Square and to change behavior and to change the way that people act. And it may have pushed some of that behavior out of Times Square, but it doesn't disappear. This is all still happening. And I think it is, sort of evidence of maybe an attempt to clean up and control and sort of pave over what was happening there, but it doesn't erase it and it doesn't change it. We always find our way to find each other.
Another book you have on your list is A Black Queer History of the United States by C. Riley Snorton and Darius Best. How does this look at Black queer identity?
So this is a book that just came out this year. Feels like long overdue. It's really brand new, or maybe last year. The years are spinning together at this point. But what this does is, I think it's a really good example that showcases the intersectionality of, the fight for queer liberation and for Black liberation, and just that, that example of like, none of us is free. One of us is free not until all of us are free. Yeah. And this takes a storytelling and narrative perspective on that, and giving you, it's not necessarily just a textbook. It is looking at the stories of people like Josephine Baker, who was openly bisexual, internationally known dancer and entertainer, Private William Cathay Williams, who was born female but enlisted in the Army as a man in the mid-1860s, and going into some of that really important history.
What myths or omissions does this book challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the myth that I think that queerness is that sort of blanket term you could put on all of our history, that there is, again, queer people are not a monolith. And so understanding how different types of queer people have fought for rights that benefit them and then benefit the whole community, I think it's continued to get rid of that myth of like just one rainbow washed all over everything. And it's like there is actually a lot of struggle in a lot of places that, it's not all the same.
Let's take a couple of calls. Let's talk to Lloyd in Manhattan. Hi, Lloyd. Thank you for taking the time to call all of it. You're on the air.
Oh, thank you. A couple of recommendations. The Very Heart of It by Thomas Mallon. It's a memoir in the form of diary entries of his gay life in New York in the 80s and early 90s. Of course, Thomas Mallon is the excellent novelist who wrote Fellow Travelers, the novel upon which the opera and TV series are based. And I just loved it. It's just such a slice of life from that era as AIDS was approaching. And also, I've just finished the new novel, John of John by Douglas Stewart, who won the Booker Prize for Shuggie Bain. He also wrote Young Mungo, which I loved. And this new one is kind of a departure. It takes place not in Glasgow, Scotland. It takes place in the Hebrides Islands, and it's so atmospheric and just wonderful.
It is on my bedside table.
It's on my front table at the store.
Let's talk to Tracy from Staten Island. Hi, Tracy. Thanks for calling all of it. You're on the air.
Hi. I am a straight, middle-aged white lady from Staten Island, and my favorite book of all time ever is Less by Andrew Sean Greer. And it won the Pulitzer Prize, so I'm not breaking any ground here. But it is the most romantic, beautiful love story I've ever read in my life. And it's like a friend breaker. Like, if you read it and don't like it, I don't like you anymore. So please read Less by Andrew Sean Greer.
Stacy, thank you so much for calling. In honor of Pride Month, we're talking about books about LGBTQ plus history and rights with author and Hive Mind Books founder Jules Warnsbach, the general manager of the Bureau of General Services Queer Division inside the center on 13th Street. Listeners, we want to hear from you as well. What books have shaped your understanding of LGBTQ plus history, rights, or culture? Is there a title that changed your perspective? Do you have a favorite LGBTQ author who you think everyone should read? Give us a call at 212-433-9692, 212-433-WNYC. We're going to get back to your list. Marsha, The Joy and Defiance of Marsha P. Johnson. Tourmaline, we had her on the show last year.
That's what I know. That's what I just heard. She's wonderful.
How does this book reveal the person behind the icon?
Yeah. Well, I think, with Marsha P. Johnson, she has become such a queer and trans icon. When I'm even buying gift items for the store, she's on everything, T-shirts and tote bags and mugs, and it's incredible, and it's amazing to see how much recognition there is of her now and how much celebration. But it's important that we know the story and the life behind the tote bag and the mug and the stickers. And so Tourmaline has written this really just deeply researched, story of Marsha's life, her full life and who she was. She was rumored to be the first person to throw a brick at Stonewall. And it's getting even beyond those legends to really know who she was. And, what I think is remarkable is I was at a trans teen art event. They did art and writing, and one of the kids was sharing how in their school they're learning about Marsha P. Johnson right now. And
That's
the adults
great.
in the room, just our jaws dropped. We were and our tears were flowing because it's so amazing that, that these details are surfacing, and that someone like Tourmaline, who is such a fabulous writer and thinker and activist, has written this for us so that we can know more than just the superficial level and know more than just, what's on those tote bags.
I remember the book being about joy
Yes.
as well as defiance. Why
Yes.
is that important?
Because, I think that as queer people, we tend to, and, queer and trans people, especially right now, it's, we get sort of identified with our struggle and identified with the rights we don't have and, how we are being oppressed in a variety of ways. And I think as queer people can also get lost in that ourselves. It's really easy to wake up every day, especially now, and go, oh man, this world really doesn't want us in it. And, it's important for us to turn inward and turn towards each other and experience our joy and know our joy and feel that. And so we need to celebrate all of the joyfulness of a person like Marsha as well, and not just the hard stuff, because we need it to survive. We need our joy.
You also have on your list the Lesbian Bar Project, the Lesbian Bar Chronicles by Rachel Karp. This looks so interesting. This is a new book, yeah?
Brand new. It came out, I want to say last week before. We just did a few events with Rachel here in town. So Rachel and her wife and best friend embarked on this epic road trip to visit every lesbian/queer bar in America. And they started off thinking, okay, well, we're hearing all these stories about how lesbian bars are in danger. And, we know that they struggle to stay open and how hard that is. And so they wanted to go and see on the ground what these places were like and get the stories and their histories.
Nice.
And they did that. And what they found along the way was that, while it's always a struggle as a small business to survive, that they were finding these really thriving queer spaces and thriving queer communities where there were tons of events. There was, a good clientele, there was support, and there was a lot of work that they were doing to, further queer rights out of these places. And so it kind of became a narrative that sort of turned around into, oh, there's actually a lot that's thriving and doing well here. So you get all of that and the fun of a road trip,
A road trip.
Yeah.
What parallels do you see as a small business
Yeah.
owner between lesbian bars and queer bookstores?
Oh, I mean, we are in very much the same pocket,
Yeah.
I would say, where we're trying to hold spaces for community, for connection, where we can take care of each other, support each other, keep our culture and literature alive, while paying rent, while paying our staff, and certainly here in New York, paying our staff a living wage.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's a real struggle because you do want to make, my impetus is always to make everything for free. But at the end of the day, you have to find that line between what can we offer and what can we do that isn't profit driven, and what are the things we do to make sure that we stay alive, and how do we, keep encouraging people to support us, and even understanding if people don't have the means to support you, how do you make space for them as well? So it's much more than a business, it really is a community space, and it's always done with so much love, And so, yeah, we are in a very similar boat. I have to give a shout out to Boyfriend Co-op. They are in Bushwick. They opened not too long after we did. They're a bar and coffee shop and event space. And they're a worker-owned cooperative. They are doing the most, and I feel so much kinship with everything that they're doing to, make a place for queer joy and queer thought and queer discussion and queer hangout and queer flirt and queer makeout.
We're getting a lot of text. This says, I'm Avidin from Fair Lawn. As someone who came out as trans later in life, I really appreciate the books with characters that haven't always known they were queer. One of my favorite books is Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail by Ashley Herring Blake. The main character is incredibly relatable to me as a later in life realizer. This one says, who was it? Fred, he said he wanted to plug Last Exit to Brooklyn for its trans character.
Oh, yeah, okay.
What else can you tell us about, what other books can our trans folks read?
Yeah, I mean, so I will say that for this list, I really focused on nonfiction because I was like, that was one of the parameters I had to put on it. And so, I mean, there's so much wonderful fiction that's come out. If I can just plug a trans novel really quickly that just came out, All Us Saints by Catherine Packard Burke, which is looking at how we live with sort of the monstrosity that we're in right now, but in a like super gripping family story. You should absolutely read that book. There's so much like great trans literature out right now. Plastic Prison Void just came out from Little Puss Press. Misconnections from Tall Girls, that's a collection of poetry, which, I highly recommend. Persona from Little Puss just came out. There's a lot.
What about nonfiction?
But nonfiction, okay, sorry. I know you got me on the fiction train and my brain just went and did a deep dive.
I love it.
But on the nonfiction side, I'll point you to Transgender History by Susan Stryker, which is a classic. It just came out in its, I want to say, third edition. Susan Stryker is an academic, and also just a creative nonfiction writer, has been in trans studies for a very long time now, and transgender history is sort of the definitive look at trans history since the 19th century. And it now has like a longer global history. They included a new like chronicle of the latest anti-trans backlash. But she is such an important person to read, and is so deep into this history. I'm actually reading her new one that's coming out in August right now called Changing Gender. And it's like looking at gender and trans issues as a language problem. It's fascinating. Anyway, I would definitely... Yeah, it's really good. It's been my subway read, which is dangerous because I do miss stops because I'm like so deep into it. And like getting into like the history of like linguistics and like gender. It's fabulous. So definitely read her. And then also Eli Ehrlich is another writer, scholar, activist who wrote a book called Before Gender, Lost Stories from Trans History, 1850 to 1950. And we had Eli in the store not too long ago to talk about these just uncovered stories. Where Susan's looking at sort of a wide sweep of trans history, Eli's really honing in on just a few stories and looking at, someone like a trans countess who instigated an LGBTQ plus riot 40 years before Stonewall. She's like really getting in there, because I think one of the things we know and we see with trans history and queer history is that there aren't always deep records. And we don't always know, because if people were living one way and had transitioned out of another, they might not have written all of that down, or they might have changed their names in places where you don't actually know that this was trans history, because people have had to hide for so long. And so, you have people like Eli Ehrlich. Amelia Possanza is another one who wrote Lesbian Love Story, a very similar... I'm like doing a deep dive into these characters who were found in archives and trying to flesh out their lives and trying to sort of understand who they were from the sort of tidbits that we have.
This says, a text we got says, shout out to the Ridgewood Queens-based zine called Dykes and Dolls.
Yeah, Dykes and Dolls.
It's an incredible free community resource. Thanks for texting that in. This says, Dear Allison, back in the early 70s, two of Kate Millet's works, Sexual Politics and Flying, plus Germaine Greer's The Female Eunuch and other writings, along with patient conversations with gay and bisexual college friends, helped open my eyes to gay issues and civil rights. I'm so fortunate to have had these people and these works, among many other related topics, in my life. Thanks for the show. Thank you for this list. We appreciate it. Yeah. My guest is Jules Warrensbach. She is an author and the Hive Mind co-founder. We're talking about books you should read for Pride Month, and you should read them any month, but we're using Pride Month as a way to get into the conversation. Let's talk about music. You have Mighty Real, A History of LGBTQ Music, 1969 to 2000. How did musicians influence people?
Yeah, I mean, so this book is another one that just came out. Barry Walters has been a music critic for a really long time in San Francisco and New York, so he's really followed everything kind of as it's unfurled. And so he is looking in this book at the role of queer people, not just, in like actually making music and like singing and playing music, but queer people in the record industry, queer people in the entertainment industry in general. And, like we all know that, like Madonna's Vogue comes from ballroom, right? Like we all know that. So Walter's just looking at stories like those. He's looking at David Bowie, Grace Jones, Sylvester, of course, and the title comes from Sylvester, Velvet Underground, Prince, and looking at how their work was shaping music and shaping, dance culture, music culture, at a time when, they were being profited from while their sexualities were controversial or maybe hidden and things like that. But it's a really like just sort of epic look at all of it. It's a big book, but don't be scared. Don't be scared.
That's okay.
It's a thick one, but it's good. It's like, it's really, he's been working on it forever, and it's very thorough.
This text says, Rita Mae Brown, especially Refuge Jungle, coming of age as a lesbian story. I did want to get into some personal narratives before we run out of time. We both laughed in pleasure at the selected diaries of Lou Sullivan. Tell us about Lou Sullivan.
Yeah, this is one of the best-selling books at Hive Mind, I have to say. So Lou Sullivan was the first publicly gay trans man to have medically transitioned. And these journals cover, from age 11 until he died of AIDS-related complications at 39. And you get everything in these journals. I love it. Like, I love reading somebody's diary. I'm a nosy person. Like, I want to see it. And so you have everything from, like, Lou's young, obsession with the Beatles, to coming out as a trans man and then going through medical transition and being one of the first people to do that. And you see also, like, because it's, it's 1961 to 1991. Those are really wild years for, civil rights from a lot of directions. And so you really see how things shifted and changed over the years. And to see somebody read somebody's, account of really just being an unapologetic gay trans man during a time when that is not easy is really inspiring and just really fun. Like, again, I love being the voyeur.
I want to get into your book before we run out of time.
Yeah, okay.
Your debut novel, Work to Do.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah.
Tell us the story.
Yeah. So it is set in a small, independently owned grocery store in Austin, Texas, in a week leading up to the staff announcing that it's going to unionize. So it's told from the perspective of the dairy manager leading the charge, who is a non-binary character who has worked in retail and service work for their entire life. And then the crotchety old lesbian owner of the store who founded it 40 years ago and doesn't think anything ever needs to change ever because everything she ever does is perfect. And then the manager in the middle who is trying to find common ground between the two of them while also working in retail and grocery retail, like book retail, has really small margins. It's really stressful. There are a lot of demanding customers. But what I wanted to write about was that tension of how people come together to run a small business. And, there's so many different bookstores and certainly beyond that are unionizing. And it's really important, and we're having such a moment for it. And it's really been surging. And it's not always black and white and clean cut when you get into the details of it. So I wanted to write about the complications of that and what that can mean for all sides. It's a very queer, like messy queers novel. It's not giving too much away to say that like that middle manager's girlfriend is perhaps involved in not only the union, but with the union leader in a way that anybody I think who's worked in the service industry would recognize, like what happens, coworker community, queer community. That's what I'm writing about in that book.
I'm so glad we got that in.
Thank
I want
you.
to list two other books that you have on your list. So Many Stars, an oral history of trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and two-spirit people of color. Yes. And you also was Ricky Tucker's, and the category is Inside New York's Vogue, House, and Ballroom Community. I wanted to get them both in because we've only got an extra minute. I did want to ask this important question. How can they foster understanding among people?
Books are so special in that way, aren't they? I mean, because it's really your one-to-one reader to writer with a book. You're really sort of sitting down in quiet without, a lot of other messaging coming at you, which I think is we're so used to now absorbing information in a sort of chaotic experience all the time. And so with books, you can really take your time with it. You can absorb it at the speed that you need to. You can put a bookmark in it and maybe do some research on something if you wanted to know more. But that really special relationship between reader and writer, I think, where there's a little bit of intimacy and a little bit of just quiet contemplation, that's where the change happens, I think. And it's so important to keep these books on the shelves and circulating.
Jules Wernsbach, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And listeners, we will have transcripts of this conversation up on the website shortly. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Allison.